One of the pieces of advice that is given to people who preach and teach is to make sure that the people who are listening can understand what it is that you're saying. In other words, don't make things too complicated. Break it down, keep it simple. And largely, I think that that is good advice. I do agree with that kind of advice. Certainly, I would say don't make things more complicated than they need to be. However, there is also a part of the equation that I think is often overlooked, and that is, I think, as people who do preach and teach, we should have the expectation that the people who are listening will also put in some effort into listening. And the reason why I come to that conclusion is really kind of wrapped up in the way that Jesus used to teach using parables. Let's take a look, for example, in Matthew 13. Matthew 13, verse 10. The disciples came to him and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" He replied, "The knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven have been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. This is why I speak to them in parables. Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not understand. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become callous. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them." So perhaps what's really odd about this is that Jesus appears to be saying, the reason why I teach in parables is so that people won't understand me. Which seems like a very odd thing to say. Why would you teach in a way so that people won't understand you? And I think the key to understanding this is the prophecy that Jesus makes reference to in his answer. He's actually referring to a prophecy from Isaiah, Isaiah chapter 6. Having had his lips touched by a coal from the altar, Isaiah was sent to the people to pronounce judgment. Now, bearing in mind that the nation was so far gone in terms of sin at this point, that God's wrath through both the Assyrians and ultimately the Babylonians was now sure. In other words, the message was not to be understood until judgment was complete. So in other words, those coming under judgment will not understand the message. But flip that around and you realize that those who are not under judgment will understand the message. In other words, Jesus is speaking in parables to really, if you like, sift through those who are listening. Those who are truly listening, those who are truly seeking, those who are truly wanting to know and understand God will hear what Jesus is teaching. Whereas those who are just casually listening, coming along for the free fish and the free bread, for those who are just wanting to see miracles and something magical happen, they're going to go away not really hearing what Jesus was trying to get through. I can think of a real life example for myself. Before I was a Christian, I used to go to church because my parents used to take me, and therefore I was well aware of various biblical stories, and one of the most famous ones I was aware of was the story of the prodigal son. Now, before I had a faith in God, I would hear that story and I would think that that was a very unfair story. I mean, it seems to simply be a case of go off, do what you want, and as long as you come back and say sorry, everything's going to be okay. It's only later, when I came to have a faith in God, that I suddenly realised that the story is not about, unfairness. It's about how we actually need to be forgiven, that we are actually the prodigal son. When we come to know God, we return to him. And that's just an example of how in your unspiritual state you get one meaning from a parable, and when you're in a more spiritual state you get a different meaning from the parable. So why did Jesus speak in parables? Simply to sift out those who were genuinely seeking and genuinely wanting to know God.